Girl pays for old man's groceries. Hours later, Mafia boss arrives at her house with 6 black SUVs. She thought buying groceries for a stranger was kindness, until 6 black SUVs surrounded her house. The man at her door isn't a thief or a cop. He's the most feared name in Port Lorne, and he knows her name. What she bought wasn't milk, it was a blood debt. Before we begin, please take a moment to support this channel by clicking the like, share, and subscribe button so you can keep enjoying awesome stories like this. Thank you. The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days, a cold, gray sheet that turned the cracked streets of Port Lorne into rivers of light. Inside a half-empty grocery store, humming under flickering bulbs, Candace Thomas stood in line after a long shift, shoes squeaking on the wet floor. Her hoodie was damp, her eyes tired, and the coins in her hand were all that stood between dinner and another night of instant noodles. Ahead of her, an old man fumbled with his wallet. His coat hung loose like it had belonged to someone bigger, someone gone. The cashier sighed, tapping the register. "I'm a few dollars short," the old man whispered, voice rough but proud. Before Candace even thought it through, she stepped forward and slid a crumpled bill across the counter. "It's fine," she murmured. "I've got it." The old man's eyes lifted, sharp, gray, unsettlingly aware. He studied her face for a heartbeat longer than comfort allowed. "Kindness like that," he said quietly, "used to mean something." Then he gathered his bag, gave a single nod, and vanished into the storm. Candace didn't know why her chest felt tight as the door closed behind him. 3 hours later, her street glowed red under brake lights. 6 black SUVs rolled to a synchronized halt outside her rundown duplex. Engines idled. Windows tinted black. Her younger brother peeked through the curtain. "Candy," he whispered, "why are there cars outside?" The front door creaked open. Rain glistened off the man stepping out of the lead SUV, tall, tattooed, dressed in tailored black, his gaze cold as a loaded gun. He looked up at her porch like he already knew her name. And that's when Candace realized, whatever she'd stepped into tonight, it wasn't random. Imagine helping a stranger, and hours later, a mafia boss parks outside your house. If that thought chills you, don't just scroll. Subscribe now, because next time it might be your story that starts in the rain. Candace Thomas wasn't reckless, just tired. She worked double shifts at a downtown cafe, saving for her brother's school fees. Their mother was gone, rent overdue. The grocery store had been a pit stop, nothing more. Kindness, she always thought, cost nothing. She'd never imagined it could cost attention or blood. The engines came first, a low, synchronized hum that made the windows quiver in their frames. Candace froze at the kitchen sink, dishwater clinging to her fingers. Her brother, Toby, peeked through the blinds. "Candy," he whispered, "why are there so many cars outside?" Her stomach dropped. 6 of them, all black, spotless despite the rain, lined up with military precision. Headlights sliced through the mist. The neighbors' curtains twitched, then went dark again, like the whole street had decided it was safer not to see. She wiped her hands on a towel, heart hammering. "Stay back," she told Toby, but her voice came out thin. "Don't go near the window." The lights flickered, once, twice, before dying completely. The sudden silence made her ears ring. Only the rain, tapping the roof like impatient fingers. Then, the crunch of boots on gravel. Candace stepped to the doorway, every instinct screaming that she shouldn't, but something stronger, the need to understand, pulled her forward. The man who stepped from the lead SUV wasn't in a hurry. He didn't need to be. The street seemed to lean back as he approached. Tall, broad-shouldered, black overcoat tailored perfectly, tattoos wound up his throat, half hidden by the collar. His eyes were cold steel, not cruel, not kind, just absolute. He stopped at the foot of her porch, the rain beating on his shoulders like it didn't dare soak him. "Candace Thomas," he said. Not asked, said. Her voice caught. "Who are you?" He didn't answer right away. Behind him, other men fanned out, silent, scanning shadows. No flashing lights. No yelling. Just control. Finally, he spoke. "My name is Dinero Alberto." Candace didn't know the name. Not really, but something in his tone made her wish she never would. He studied her, unreadable. "You paid for a man's groceries tonight." Her throat went dry. I guess I did." He was short a few dollars. "Why? Did you look him in the eye?" The question hung there like a blade. Yes." He nodded once, slow. "Then he looked at you for a reason." A flicker of confusion cut through her fear. What are you talking about? Who was he? De Niro's gaze shifted past her, to the faint glow of the kitchen where Toby's small shadow lingered near the hall. His jaw tightened, not in threat, but in something else. Consideration. You should keep your brother away from the windows, he said quietly. Men like me bring storms with them. Candace swallowed hard. What do you want from me? He took a step up onto the porch. The boards creaked beneath his shoes. For a heartbeat, he was close enough that she could smell the faint trace of gunpowder and rain in his coat. I don't want anything, he said. Not yet. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded photo, and held it up. Do you recognize this man? The image was grainy, but unmistakable, the old man from the store. The sagging coat, the weary eyes. Her breath hitched. That's him, she whispered. What's his name? Salvatore Leone, De Niro said. His voice sharpened, not louder, just heavier. Once upon a time, he sat beside me at a table that decided who lived and who vanished. I buried him 15 years ago. Candace blinked, words lost somewhere in her chest. You mean he's dead? De Niro's eyes flicked upward. He was supposed to be. He slipped the photo back into his coat, rain dripping from his sleeve. Tell me, Miss Thomas, when he looked at you, did he seem afraid? Candace hesitated. No, she said finally. More like sad. De Niro's jaw flexed. Then he knew. He turned slightly, looking out at the street, at his men, the vehicles, the wet asphalt that glowed under their headlights. When a ghost comes back to life, someone pays for it. Maybe him. Maybe you. Depends how deep he wants to drag you in. Her knees weakened. I don't understand any of this. You don't have to, he replied, taking a slow breath. But understand this. If you see him again, you don't run. You call me. I don't even have your number. He looked over his shoulder. One of his men stepped forward, placing a small black card on the porch railing. Just a number. No name. De Niro stepped back into the rain. Get some sleep. Candace Thomas, he said, voice low, almost pitying. Tomorrow will be louder. He turned, motioned with 2 fingers, and the SUVs roared to life. Within seconds, the street was empty again, as if the night had swallowed them whole. Candace stood in the doorway, barefoot, watching taillights fade into the mist. Her breath came unevenly. The rain hit her face, cold and clean, but her skin burned like she'd been branded. Behind her, Toby's voice trembled. Candy, who was that? She didn't answer. She looked down at the black card. No logo. No address. Just digits. They gleamed faintly in the porch light, like coordinates to a storm. Her reflection wavered in the puddle at her feet, tired eyes, rain-slick hair, and a face she barely recognized anymore. She'd paid $20 for groceries. Now she owed something far more dangerous. You never know who's watching a simple act of kindness. And the worst dangers? They don't knock. They arrive silently, in 6 black SUVs. Stay alert, stay hooked, subscribe so you never miss the warning signs next time. Candace stepped back inside and locked the door twice. But as she turned off the porch light, she couldn't shake the feeling that the man's words weren't a threat, they were a countdown. And somewhere in the rain, someone was still watching. Candace barely slept. Every sound outside, the creak of the gutters, the whisper of rain against the glass, jolted her awake. Her mind replayed the image of the SUVs, the sound of De Niro Alberto's voice, the way his eyes had cut through her like he could see the thought forming before she even spoke it. By morning, the storm had passed, leaving the world washed out and hollow. Toby sat at the table, chewing cereal in silence, watching his sister stare blankly at her cold coffee. Are they gone? He asked. Candace glanced through the blinds. 2 black cars sat quietly down the street. Same models, different formation. She didn't need a badge to know whose they were. They're not gone, she said softly. They're just watching. Toby frowned. Should we call the police? Candace almost laughed, the kind of tired, brittle laugh that cracked in her throat. And say what? That a mafia boss stopped by for a chat. He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The fear was already sitting between them, quiet and heavy. At exactly 9:15, there was a knock on the door. Not loud, but deliberate. Her stomach twisted. Through the peephole, 2 men. Suits. Polished shoes. No umbrellas, though their shoulders glistened with drizzle. Candace hesitated, her fingers hovering over the lock. "Miss Thomas," one of them called. His tone was calm, official. "We'd like to ask you a few questions." She opened the door just enough to meet their eyes. "About what?" The man on the left produced a photo from an inside pocket. "This man," he said. "You saw him last night, didn't you?" Candace's breath hitched. It was the old man. The same deep lines, the same worn coat. The grayscale image looked older than memory, like it belonged in a newspaper from another decade. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, he was in front of me at the store." The second man exchanged a glance with the first. "Do you know who he is?" "No," she said. "Just some old guy who couldn't pay for his groceries." The first man sighed, slipping the photo back into his coat. "His name is Salvatore Leone. Sal to those who used to know him." The name landed like a dropped match in a dry field. Candace frowned. "That's supposed to mean something to me?" The second man spoke now, voice clipped and measured. "It should. 15 years ago, Salvatore Leone was the consigliere of the Leone crime family, the architect behind half the major deals that built the East Coast Syndicate, until he disappeared during what the newspapers called the Night of the Blood Pact." She blinked, trying to make sense of it. "You mean he's dead?" Both men looked at her like she'd said the one thing they couldn't. "He was supposed to be," the first replied. "Every record says he was executed that night. No body, no funeral, just a rumor that Dinero Alberto had him taken out." Candace's pulse quickened. "You're telling me that man I helped shouldn't exist," the second finished. The room tilted for a second. She gripped the doorframe to steady herself. He didn't seem like some mafia ghost. He was just old, tired. "That's how ghosts hide," the man said. "Behind ordinary faces. Behind pity." Something about his tone made her chest tighten. "What do you want from me?" "Just the truth," he said. "What did he say to you? Did he give you anything?" Candace thought back. The trembling hands, the gravel-edged voice, the look in his eyes that had lingered a beat too long. "No," she said. "He just thanked me. That's all." The men exchanged another silent glance, professional but uneasy. "If he contacts you again," the first said, "call this number." He handed her a plain white card. "Federal, or pretending to be. You don't want to get caught between ghosts and the men who buried them." Before she could ask what that meant, they were already walking back to their black sedan, engines humming low. As soon as they turned the corner, two other cars, Dinero's, rolled forward to take their place. Candace stood at the window, arms folded tightly, watching, waiting. The sense of safety that used to live inside these walls was gone, replaced by something that felt like surveillance. She was both protected and trapped, a witness no one trusted, a pawn no one wanted to admit they'd moved. By afternoon, she noticed the patterns. The same man leaning against the lamppost with a newspaper. The same black SUV idling by the corner store. The faint click in her phone when she made a call. Everywhere she looked, someone was listening. That night, Candace sat on the couch, lights dimmed, Toby asleep on the pull-out beside her. She couldn't shake the name. Salvatore Leone. It sounded like a ghost story, like something people whispered about over whiskey and regret. She opened her laptop and typed it in. Salvatore Isiel Leone, presumed dead, 2010. Consigliere to the Leone family. Disappeared following the Night of the Blood Pact, a violent purge that left 14 dead and ended a decades-long truce between rival syndicates. Alleged orchestrator, Dinero Alberto. Her screen glowed cold against her face. The man who'd thanked her for buying him milk and bread had once decided who lived and who vanished. She closed the laptop and stared at the black reflection of herself in the screen. How could something so kind, a simple gesture, unravel into this? It's strange, isn't it? One moment of kindness, and suddenly your name ends up on someone else's list. The world's darker corners don't wait for permission, they find you. Don't get caught unprepared. Subscribe now, because sometimes the next knock isn't just a story, it's a warning. Outside, headlights drifted across her wall, one of Dinero's cars repositioning again. She should have felt safe. Instead, she felt owned. She thought about the old man's trembling hands, about Dinero's calm, dangerous eyes, about how both men had looked at her, not like a stranger, but like a piece of something larger. That night, as rain began again, Candace whispered into the dark, "Who are you, Salvatore Leone?" And somewhere, out beyond the city, under another storm, a man who was supposed to be dead might have whispered her name back. By morning, the street was wrapped in a mist that smelled like metal and salt, the kind that dulled the edges of everything. Candace's nerves had dulled too, but the unease still hummed beneath her skin, a low static she couldn't shake. The black SUVs were still there, unmoving, idling through silence. She'd stopped pulling back the curtain to check on them. It didn't matter anymore. Whether she looked or not, they were watching. She made coffee she didn't drink, toast she didn't eat. Toby shuffled out in his hoodie, rubbing his eyes. "They're still out there," he muttered, peeking through the blinds. "Are we in trouble?" Candace forced a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "No, they're just making sure we're safe." It sounded like something an adult was supposed to say, but even Toby heard the hollow echo in her tone. After he left for school, she tried to focus, washing dishes, tidying, anything to feel like her life was still her own. But at noon, when she stepped out to check the mailbox, something new caught her eye. A slip of paper wedged into the crack of the front door frame. At first, she thought it was just another flyer, but it was damp, folded, and torn unevenly along one edge. Her name wasn't on it, just faint, smudged ink. She unfolded it with shaking hands. A grocery store receipt. From the night before. The timestamp, 7:42 p.m., the exact time she'd been standing behind the old man in line. On the back, written in hurried pen strokes, "If they come for me, they'll come for her. She reminds me of my daughter. SL." For a long moment, the world tilted. The paper trembled between her fingers. He'd known. He'd known Dinero would come. Knew the SUVs, the questions, the surveillance, all of it. Candace sank against the doorframe, her breath sharp and shallow. "What did you do, old man?" she whispered. The guilt hit her hard and fast. Had he used her? Had she been bait? The receipt crumpled in her fist. If he'd written that note before leaving the store, then the man she'd helped wasn't a helpless stranger at all. He'd been planning something, or running from something, and she'd just stepped into the path of it. That night, she dreamed of the grocery store again. But this time, when she looked at the old man, the lights flickered, and he wasn't old anymore. His coat was pressed, his face unlined, his eyes sharp and calculating. A man in his prime, seated at a long table under dim chandeliers, surrounded by men with rings and shadows. He leaned toward another figure, younger, colder, Dinero Alberto. "You've got loyalty," Sal said, his voice younger but just as gravel-edged. "But loyalty without truth is just a leash." Dinero's eyes were unreadable. "And truth gets men killed." The sound of a gunshot cracked through the dream, and Sal's head jerked back. Blood hit the table. Candace woke gasping, her heart pounding, rain pounding harder against the windows. For a long time, she just sat there, staring at the wall, trying to shake the images that weren't hers, couldn't be hers. But they felt real. She turned the receipt over in her hands again. The ink was smeared, but one word stood out: daughter. That single word sank into her chest like a stone. Maybe he hadn't used her. Maybe she'd reminded him of someone he'd lost before that night of the blood pact. But why leave her a note like this? Why drag her into his mess at all? By the next afternoon, she noticed the change in the air outside. The SUVs were still there, but now there were men standing guard beside them, scanning every car that passed. A quiet tension pulsed through the neighborhood, as if everyone could feel something shifting. At sunset, Dinero's car arrived. Candace's pulse spiked. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The doorbell didn't ring, not this time. A knock, slow and measured, echoed through the apartment. When she finally opened the door, Dinero stood alone. No guards, no umbrella, just the rain dripping from the hem of his coat. "Can I come in?" he asked. Candace hesitated, then stepped aside. He walked in, silent, every motion deliberate. He stopped near the window, glanced once at Toby's drawings on the fridge, and said quietly, "You found the note." Her throat went dry. "You knew?" He nodded once. "We intercepted a message last night. Sal's handwriting. He left it before the store cameras cut off." She swallowed. He used me. No, De Niro said simply. He trusted you. That's different. Trusted me with what? De Niro turned, his gaze steady. With proof that he's alive. With proof that I was wrong about him. Candace's voice trembled. He said if they came for him, they'd come for me. They would have, De Niro replied. My men got here first. She stared at him, trying to read what hid behind his calm. So what now? You protect me until you find him. He gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. Something like that. When he left, the apartment felt smaller. The silence heavier. Candace sank into the couch, the receipt still clutched in her hand. She'd done the right thing, helped someone who needed it. But now, her kindness had a body count. Later that night, she taped the receipt inside her journal, not to keep it safe, but to remind herself it was real, that she hadn't imagined any of this. On the opposite page, she wrote, I helped a stranger, and it woke up ghosts. She stared at it for a long time before closing the book. Outside, the rain eased into a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat against the glass. Ever felt punished for doing the right thing? That's Candace now, trapped between guilt and survival. But what's worse? Doing nothing and wondering forever. Don't stay in the dark. Hit subscribe, and don't be the one who turns away when it matters most. Candace switched off the lamp and lay still, the sound of the rain filling the silence. Somewhere out there, the man she'd helped was running from ghosts. But tonight, she wasn't sure who was haunting who. Candace knew it was him before she opened the door. Not from the sound. De Niro never knocked the same way twice, but from the silence that followed. That heavy, deliberate stillness that wrapped around the air like a warning. When she finally turned the handle, he stood there again. No guards this time. No cars idling outside. Just him. Black coat. Rain at his collar. Eyes dark enough to drown in. You shouldn't be here, she said softly. I know, he replied. That's why I came alone. He stepped inside before she could decide whether to let him, and she realized then, he was different. Not in posture or tone, but in the faint tremor behind his calm. The kind that only showed when a man's armor had cracks. The apartment felt smaller with him in it, though he barely moved. His gaze scanned the dim room, the flicker of the lamp, the folded blanket on the couch. Everything about him felt out of place here, too sharp for the soft edges of normal life. You still watching me? She asked, trying to sound braver than she felt. He didn't answer right away. Not tonight. That, somehow, frightened her more. He sat down at the kitchen table, gloved hands resting flat against the wood. She stayed standing, arms crossed, like a witness refusing to testify. You said Sal Leone was dangerous, she said finally. That he used me. But now your men are guarding me like I'm the one in danger. De Niro looked up slowly. Because you are. Her pulse jumped. From him. From everyone who still wants him buried. His tone was low, the kind that carried the weight of a story too heavy to tell all at once. He drew in a slow breath. 15 years ago, the Leone family was the closest thing this city had to a kingdom. Salvatore Leone. He wasn't just the consigliere. He was the mind behind everything. He taught me the business. The codes. The rules. What loyalty meant. He paused, eyes flicking toward the window where the rain smeared city light into gold. Then one night, it all burned. The night of the blood pact. You've heard of it. Candace nodded faintly. The phrase had been whispered on true crime forums, half legend, half myth. De Niro's voice dropped lower. They said Sal sold us out, traded our locations to federal agents for immunity. My men found the ledger, the bank transfers, the names. Proof. I was young. Angry. I ordered it done. The way he said it made her stomach twist. They dragged him from his home. Took him to the docks. I didn't watch. He hesitated. But I signed the order. Candace swallowed hard. You killed your own mentor. I thought I did. His gaze locked on hers. Unreadable, yet heavy with something rawer than guilt. Until your receipt showed up. Until someone started using his name again. She didn't speak. Couldn't. For the first time, she saw something human in him. Not power, not menace, but regret. The kind that eats from the inside out. He leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet, measured. Now people are whispering that Sal didn't betray us. That he was framed by the very people who swore loyalty to me. Candace's chest tightened. You think he's alive? I know he's alive, De Niro said. And he's watching you. Because you remind him of something. Of someone. Her breath caught. He said that in his note. I read it. De Niro's eyes flickered with something she couldn't name. Not jealousy, not anger, but something that looked almost like envy. He had a daughter, Isabella. She died before the blood pact. You look like her. The room went silent. Candace's mind felt suddenly unmoored, the world bending under the weight of too many truths. So what do you want from me? She asked. He didn't hesitate. Help me find him. Candace's pulse hammered. I can't. You can. De Niro interrupted, his tone quiet but commanding. He'll reach out again. He has to. You're the only piece of innocence left in his world, and he can't resist that. When he does, I need to be there. She stepped back, shaking her head. And if I say no? His silence was answer enough. Finally, he said, then my men keep watching you. Every hour, every move, until this is over. Her throat tightened. That's not a choice. No, De Niro said softly. It's survival. For a moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the faint tick of the kitchen clock. Candace leaned against the counter, fighting the chill creeping through her. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know what you're in the middle of. He looked at her then, the way people look at graves, not with fear, but with understanding. And because I'm tired of ghosts. Candace studied his face, the sharp jaw, the faint scars at his temple, the weariness behind his control. You don't trust anyone, do you? She asked quietly. He gave a faint, humorless smile. Trust gets men killed. But I'm trying. Her next words came out before she could stop them. You think helping you will save you? He stood, slow and deliberate, his coat brushing the chair leg. No, he said. But maybe it'll make peace with the man I buried. He reached into his pocket and slid something across the table. A burner phone, black, no markings. When he calls, he said, don't answer. Just let it ring once. My people will trace it. Candace stared at it, her hand hovering above the device like it might burn her. And if he doesn't call? De Niro looked toward the door. He will. She followed his gaze, and for a second, she thought she saw something almost like sorrow cross his face. Brief, unguarded, gone as soon as it appeared. He turned to leave, pausing in the doorway. The rain had stopped. Before stepping out, he said quietly, he'll come for you. You remind him of what he lost. Then the door closed, and the sound of his footsteps faded down the hall. Candace stood there for a long time, the phone cold in her palm, her reflection ghosted in the window glass. Somewhere out there, a man everyone thought dead was watching her, and another, alive, powerful, broken, was waiting for her to lead him straight to him. She didn't know which was worse, being hunted by the past, or helping it find its way home. A confession can change everything, especially when it comes from the devil you thought you knew. Candace is trapped between truth and betrayal now. What would you choose, loyalty or survival? Don't miss what happens next. Subscribe before the next secret surfaces. It was almost midnight when the phone rang. No ringtone, just a vibration that sliced through the silence of her apartment like a blade through glass. Candace froze. The burner phone, the one De Niro had left. It shouldn't have rung. Not yet. Her hands trembled as she picked it up. The screen glowed a faint green, unknown number. For a second, she just stared. Then, with a breath that barely made it past her lips, she pressed accept. Hello. The voice that answered was dry, sandpaper against static, familiar, yet distant, like it had traveled years to reach her. Candace. Her heart stopped. Mr. Leone, she whispered. A soft chuckle, tired and low. They still say my name. That's dangerous. Her mouth went dry. They said you were dead. They say a lot of things. Don't trust anyone in black suits. Not the ones who smile, not the ones who pray. They're all paid by the same devil. His tone hardened, each word pressed with purpose. If you still want answers, Doc 12. Midnight. Come alone. And before she could speak again, the line went dead. Candace sat there for a long moment, clutching the phone, her mind spinning between fear and disbelief. Sal was alive, not just alive, but reaching out. Every instinct screamed run. But curiosity, it had its own gravity. She called De Niro. He answered on the first ring. Where are you? She didn't waste words. He called. Silence. Then the faint sound of him exhaling smoke. Where? Doc 12. Midnight. He said not to trust anyone in black suits. A pause. That sounds like him. What do I do? She asked, her voice breaking. You go, De Niro said simply. Candace's eyes widened. What? You want me to meet him? He didn't hesitate. You're the only one he'll talk to. If I show up, he disappears. If you don't, we lose him again. Her voice rose, panic breaking through. You're asking me to walk into a meeting with a man everyone's tried to kill for 15 years. I'm not asking, he said. I'm trusting you. The word trusting landed like a knife turned backwards, too sharp, too loaded to feel like a gift. She heard faint movement through the line, a drawer opening, metal shifting. You'll wear a wire, De Niro continued. My men will be nearby. Silent. If anything goes wrong, they move. Candace's breath came short. You mean surveillance? I mean protection, he said, calm but firm. She almost laughed, a bitter, disbelieving sound. You don't protect people, De Niro. You control them. He didn't deny it. Maybe, but that's how people stay alive in my world. She closed her eyes, gripping the edge of the counter. The world around her, the flickering light, the hum of the fridge, the faint city sirens, suddenly felt too fragile, too ordinary for what was being asked of her. I didn't sign up for this, she whispered. No one ever does, De Niro replied. But we all end up here anyway, standing between two ghosts. An hour later, she sat in the back seat of one of De Niro's SUVs. The wire pressed cold against her skin, taped beneath her blouse. Every movement reminded her she wasn't just herself anymore. She was bait. She was leverage. She was the line between two men haunted by the same past. De Niro sat beside her, his face shadowed under the streetlight glow. He handed her an earpiece. You'll hear me. I'll hear you. Nothing else. She nodded, swallowing hard. He leaned closer, his voice a quiet current. If he says your name twice, that's your sign. Step back. My men will move. What if he runs? Then you let him. I'll handle the rest. Candace looked at him, really looked at him. The lines under his eyes, the weariness that power couldn't hide. And for a fleeting second, she saw not a kingpin, not a villain, just a man chasing a ghost he helped create. Why do you need me? She asked softly. De Niro turned his gaze toward the rain-spattered window. Because he still believes in good people. And I ran out of those a long time ago. Dock 12 sat at the edge of the industrial district, where the city forgot itself. Crates stacked like tombstones, air thick with salt and oil, fog rolling low over the water. Candace stepped out alone. The wire buzzed faintly, like a heartbeat pressed against her ribs. De Niro's voice came through her earpiece, steady, controlled. We've got eyes on you. 2 blocks out. You're doing fine. She moved through the mist, her breath clouding the air. Every creak of the dock felt amplified, the wood shifting, the water lapping. Then she saw him. Salvatore Leone. Older now, thinner, his face carved by years of hiding. But those eyes, sharp, knowing, hadn't faded. He stood under the pier light, hat brim low, one hand gripping a cane that looked more symbolic than necessary. Candace stopped a few feet away. You came, he said, voice soft, as though surprised. You called, she replied, fighting to keep her voice steady. He studied her, a faint smile ghosting across his lips. You shouldn't have told him. Her stomach turned cold. You knew? I taught him everything, Sal said quietly. Every play, every trick, every lie. Did you think he wouldn't use them? Her pulse pounded in her ears. He said you betrayed him. Sal's laugh was hoarse, bitter. That's what he needed to believe. That's how boys become kings, by killing their fathers in spirit first. Candace felt her breath falter. Then who betrayed you? The old man's eyes lifted to hers. For a moment, they were wet with something unspoken. Ask him whose account the blood money came from. Ask who kept the gun that night. The words hit her like a slap, half riddle, half confession. She didn't understand them, but she felt the weight they carried. Behind her ear, she could almost hear De Niro's breathing through the wire. Heavier now, silent, but listening. Sal took a slow step closer. Tell him I forgive him, but I'll never come back. And with that, he turned, vanishing into the fog as though the night had swallowed him whole. Candace, De Niro's voice came through, tight, strained. Did you see him leave? Confirm visual. She didn't answer. Her hand reached up slowly and tore the wire from beneath her shirt, the adhesive ripping from her skin. Candace, talk to me. She let the wire fall into the water, watching it disappear with a quiet hiss. Candace, but she was already walking, away from the pier, away from the men in the shadows, away from both ghosts. She didn't know who was telling the truth anymore. Maybe neither. Maybe both. All she knew was that trust, in their world, was just another word for suicide. This is where trust can kill you. Candace has no idea which handshake holds a knife. In a world like this, knowledge saves you. That's why you subscribe, to stay one step ahead before life pulls the trigger. The fog was thicker tonight, heavy, swallowing the light, smothering the world in gray. The air reeked of salt and rust, and something older, something metallic that clung to the throat. Candace stood near the edge of the dock, arms wrapped tight around herself, the cold creeping into her bones. Every chain creaked. Every ripple of water sounded like a whisper that didn't want to be heard. She was alone, or at least that's how it looked. In truth, she knew better. Dinero's men were ghosts in the mist, their silhouettes half seen between crates and shadows. Their silence was worse than the darkness. Her heart thudded like a metronome, counting down to something inevitable. Then she heard it. Slow, uneven footsteps on wet wood. Salvatore Leone emerged from the fog. He looked smaller than she remembered, coat hanging loose, one hand gripping the dock rail as though the years weighed too much. But his eyes, those sharp gray eyes, still cut through the night with impossible clarity. He stopped a few feet away. "You came," he said softly. Candace nodded. "You called." He gave a faint smile. "Did he send you alone?" Before she could answer, another sound rolled across the dock, the low growl of engines. 6 black SUVs. They appeared like shadows solidifying from the mist, headlights off, windows tinted. The air seemed to shiver with the weight of power arriving. Candace turned, heart hammering. Doors opened in synchronized silence. And then Dinero stepped out. He moved with a kind of controlled fury, composed, but electric beneath the surface. His suit was black, tailored. The tattoos along his neck caught the faint lamplight like dark rivers. His men spread out behind him, weapons low but ready. Sal's expression didn't change. He simply exhaled, a sound that was part sigh, part resignation. "So it ends here," he murmured. Dinero stopped a few feet away. 15 years, he said. 15 years hiding in the cracks while I buried every man who swore you were dead. Sal looked up, meeting his gaze without flinching. "You always needed an enemy, Dinero. It made you feel alive." Dinero's jaw clenched. "You betrayed me." "No," Sal said quietly. "I protected you. You were too young to see the knives coming from your own table." Candace's pulse quickened. Her eyes darted between them. 2 men bound by something deeper than hate, heavier than loyalty. Dinero's men began to fan wider, circling the dock. Candace stepped back instinctively. "Then explain this," Dinero said coldly. He pulled a small folder from his coat, worn, water-stained. "These," he tossed it to the ground, "bank transfers, coded messages, shipments routed through your name." Sal didn't move. "You ever read who signed them?" For a moment, Dinero hesitated. Sal reached into his coat. The movement made several guns click, safety catches sliding back. "Easy," he said, voice steady. "If I wanted you dead, I wouldn't have chosen a dock crawling with your soldiers." He pulled out a single envelope and threw it across the wet boards. It slid to a stop near Dinero's feet. "What's that?" Dinero asked. "Proof," Sal said. "Your lieutenants, Moretti, Cade, and Voss, they sold you out. Took payoffs from the Federals, staged the hit on me, forged the execution report. Every debt you've been paying for 15 years has been to your own thieves." Dinero crouched slowly, picking up the envelope. His hand trembled, just barely, as he opened it. Inside were photographs, receipts, bank wires, signatures that shouldn't exist. His eyes moved faster, sharper, disbelief turning into something colder. Candace watched the realization hit him like a physical blow. Sal spoke again, softer now. "You think I ran from you, but I stayed alive for you, waiting until you could finally see the truth." The silence that followed was unbearable, the kind that hums in the bones. And then chaos broke it. One of Dinero's men, Voss, moved first. Gun drawn, eyes wild. "He's lying," he shouted, firing before anyone could think. Candace screamed. The bullet tore through the fog, catching Sal in the shoulder. He staggered back, hand clutching blood. Dinero's head snapped toward Voss, eyes blazing. "You idiot." But it was too late. The other traitors reacted, panic blooming like wildfire. Gunfire erupted, deafening, blinding, flashing in bursts of orange light. Candace dropped behind a crate, hard in her throat, the acrid taste of gunpowder in the air. Through the chaos, She saw Sal fall to one knee. A second shot grazed his leg. He would have been finished if not for what happened next. Candace cried out, a raw, terrified sound that cut through everything. Sal lifted his head at the sound, and with one last, staggering movement, he lunged, pulling her down as another bullet sliced through the space where she'd been standing. The impact sent them both sprawling. His blood was hot against her hands. Stay down, he rasped. De Niro turned on his men, fury and disbelief mixing like fire and gasoline. He raised his gun, no hesitation, no mercy. 2 shots. Boss fell. Then Moretti. The fog reeked of cordite and betrayal. When the last echo faded, only the sound of waves remained. Candace crawled toward Sal, tears streaking her face. You're bleeding. He managed a faint smile. Not the first time. De Niro stepped forward, his gun still warm, his expression unreadable. He looked at Sal for a long moment. You should have stayed dead, he said quietly. Sal coughed, blood at the corner of his mouth. You killed ghosts that weren't haunting you, De Niro. The ones who sold us out wore your colors. He nodded toward the fallen men. De Niro's gaze followed. The weight of it all, years of lies, revenge, misplaced faith, crushed the hardness from his face. Sal tossed him a weak grin. Loyalty was our currency, remember? For the first time, De Niro didn't answer with violence. He just stood there, rain falling around him, gun lowering slowly. Then, in silence, he extended a hand. Sal looked at it, bloodied, trembling, and took it. They walked out of the fog together, one leaning, one carrying, both broken in different ways. Behind them, the harbor lights flickered, reflecting off the black water like a funeral procession. Candace followed a few steps behind, heart heavy but strangely at peace. For the first time, she saw that power and mercy could share the same face, if only for a moment. That night, she understood. The world didn't divide between good and evil. It divided between those who remembered what loyalty meant and those who sold it for comfort. And sometimes, truth didn't cleanse the blood, it just made it stop bleeding. The sirens never came. By the time the fog began to lift, the docks were already swept clean, blood rinsed into the harbor, shell casings gone, bodies vanished as if the night had devoured them whole. Only the echo of gunfire lingered, trapped in the mist. Candace stood beneath a flickering streetlight, blanket around her shoulders, the metallic scent of blood and sea clinging to her skin. Her hands still shook. She didn't know whose blood stained her sleeves, Sal's or her own imagination. De Niro's men worked with silent precision. No shouts, no questions. Just a quiet efficiency that spoke of years spent erasing the truth. A black SUV waited at the end of the pier, headlights off. De Niro stood beside it, coat collar turned up, hair slicked by the rain. His eyes looked older, not tired, but emptied, like a man who'd buried too much of himself to ever dig back out. Get her home, he told one of his men. His voice was low, steady, final. Candace opened her mouth, searching for words, but none came. De Niro turned to her then, not as a boss, not as a threat, just a man standing in the wreckage of something he'd built and broken. You don't owe me anything, he said, but you'll stay quiet. For your sake. She nodded. That was all she could manage. The drive home felt unreal. The rain tapping against the windows, the city lights blurring past like memories she didn't belong to anymore. When the SUV stopped outside her duplex, the street was silent. Her brother's bedroom window glowed faintly, a small mercy. One of the men opened her door. You're safe now, he said. Candace almost laughed. Safe. The word felt foreign, impossible. She stepped out, the puddles splashing cold around her shoes. Before she could look back, the SUVs were gone, swallowed by the same darkness they'd arrived in. By morning, the city had moved on. News outlets buzzed with headlines. Gang retaliation at waterfront. Multiple dead in power struggle between syndicates. No names. No photos. Just a passing storm in the underworld. Another ghost story for the people who pretended not to see the smoke. Candace watched the news in silence, coffee untouched. Every image, every clipped soundbite felt wrong, like someone describing a nightmare she hadn't yet woken from. No mention of Sal. No mention of De Niro. Only the faint certainty that both still breathed somewhere beyond reach. She spent the next few days in a strange rhythm. Work, sleep, write, repeat. The journal on her nightstand grew heavier with each page, fragments of dialogue, half-remembered gestures, faces blurred by rain. She wasn't sure why she wrote it down. Maybe to prove to herself it had happened. Maybe because silence was heavier than the truth. Sometimes, when the rain came, she thought she saw a black SUV idling at the corner. Sometimes she thought she imagined it. Either way, she kept her curtains drawn. A week later, it arrived. The envelope was plain, cream-colored, no return address. Just her name, handwritten in elegant, deliberate strokes. It sat in her mailbox like a heartbeat. She turned it over in her hands for a long time before opening it. Inside, a folded note, a small stack of cash, crisp hundreds, and a single red rose, its stem wrapped in black silk. Her breath caught. The paper smelled faintly of smoke and rain. The handwriting was unmistakable. For the groceries. For saving two old fools from their ghosts. D.A. Candace sank onto the steps of her porch, the note trembling between her fingers. The rain had started again, slow at first, then heavier, washing the ink until the words blurred into each other like a secret meant to fade. She pressed the rose to her lips. For the first time since that night, she cried. Not out of fear, but from the quiet weight of knowing her smallest kindness had altered something far larger than herself. Days passed, then weeks. The neighborhood settled back into routine. Garbage trucks, kids biking through puddles, neighbors pretending not to gossip. Life resumed its dull rhythm. Candace paid her rent in full, then her brother's school fees, then tucked the rest of the money away, unsure what to do with it. The journal stayed on her table, open to the page where she'd written 3 words: rain, blood, mercy. Sometimes she added to it, small details she'd missed before. The way De Niro had looked at Sal before lowering his gun. The way Sal had smiled, even bleeding, as if death itself were just another secret between old friends. And sometimes she dreamt of them, sitting together somewhere far away, perhaps on another rainy night. No guns, no debts, no ghosts left to chase. One evening, she walked along the shoreline. The tide had come in, curling against the rocks like breath. The sky hung heavy and gray. She tilted her face upward, letting the rain fall freely now. She thought of that night at the grocery store, the trembling hands, the damp bills, the old man's eyes studying her like she was something he'd forgotten existed. Kindness. That was all it had been. And yet, it had rewritten 15 years of blood and silence. Candace turned to head home. But as she reached her car, something caught her eye. A small, folded note tucked beneath her windshield wiper. Her pulse spiked. She glanced around. No one. Just the sound of waves. The paper was damp but intact. Inside, written in the same deliberate hand as before. Keep being kind. S. She stood there for a long time. The note pressed to her chest as rain cascaded down her face. A smile broke through the tears. The world, she realized, was full of debts unseen, and sometimes the ones that mattered most were paid not in blood, but in mercy. So if you ever think kindness doesn't matter, remember Candace Thomas. A $20 grocery bill rewrote 15 years of vengeance. And somewhere, in a world still ruled by power and fear, 2 old ghosts found peace because one woman refused to look away. If you think small kindness doesn't matter, remember Candace. A $20 gesture rewrote 15 years of blood debt. Subscribe now, because sometimes the smallest act can rewrite your own story too. 6 months later, the city had forgotten. The docks were rebuilt. The papers moved on. And the name Leone had faded again into the whispers of 100 untold crimes. But for Candace Thomas, the echoes still lived in the quiet, in the rain against her windows, in the way engines hummed down her street a little too slowly, in the silence that followed every act of kindness. Her new apartment faced the sea, a modest 2-bedroom with salt-streaked windows and a balcony that smelled of brine and freedom. The landlord had called it a little rough, but peaceful. Peaceful. That word had become her rebellion. Most mornings, she walked her brother to school, a small, cheerful building with chipped blue paint and laughter spilling out of every corner. His uniform was new this time, paid for in full. The envelope De Niro left had done more than cover debts. It had bought breathing room, dignity, and a fragile sense of possibility. She never touched the rest of the money. It stayed sealed in a tin box under her bed, not out of fear, but out of respect. She didn't want to live off ghosts. Instead, she started volunteering at a shelter, at a food drive, wherever help was needed. She didn't tell anyone about the night at the docks. She didn't need to. Every time she handed someone a meal, she remembered Sal's trembling hands and the words he'd left behind. If they come for me, they'll come for her. But no one came. When it rained, though, she couldn't help it. She always looked. From her balcony, the sea would darken into glass, and the city lights would smear into ribbons across the waves. Somewhere deep in the fog, she half expected to see movement, a tall silhouette under an umbrella, or the glint of headlights that didn't belong. She never did. Still, part of her hoped. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something gentler. The ache of unfinished stories. She imagined De Niro somewhere far away, maybe in Sicily or South America, rebuilding what was left of himself. Maybe he still thought about Sal. Maybe, for the first time, he'd learned what loyalty truly meant. And Sal, if he'd survived that night, she hoped he'd found peace. The kind that comes after a storm, when all that's left is the sound of the tide washing everything clean. One Thursday evening, as the sun disappeared into the sea, Candace stopped by her car after a long shift at the diner. The air was heavy with rain, that slow, electric stillness before the sky breaks open. She paused, noticing something on her windshield, a small, folded note, glistening with raindrops. Her breath caught. It was the same kind of paper, the same careful handwriting. Hands trembling, she unfolded it under the streetlight. Keep being kind. S. The ink had smudged slightly, but the signature was unmistakable. Her eyes blurred instantly. A quiet, unguarded smile tugged at her lips. The world around her seemed to still, the hum of the rain, the hiss of tires in puddles, the faraway cry of a gull. Everything slowed into one sharp, beautiful second where time folded in on itself. He was alive. Somehow, impossibly, he was alive. She pressed the note against her chest, the way she once held his grocery receipt, the way she'd once prayed she hadn't been used, hadn't been foolish to care. But standing there, drenched and trembling, she knew none of it had been foolish. Mercy wasn't a weakness. It was the only thing in this world that could survive the fire. Later that night, she sat on her balcony, wrapped in a blanket, watching the storm roll in over the Black Sea. The note rested beside her mug of tea, fluttering in the wind like something alive. Lightning flashed, lighting up the horizon. For a moment, she thought she saw a shape in the distance. A man in a long coat, walking the pier, head bowed. She blinked, and he was gone. Maybe it was a trick of the rain. Maybe it was memory. Either way, she whispered into the storm, her voice barely carried by the wind. Thank you. In the months that followed, Candace began to write again, not in fear, not in secrecy, but as a witness. Her journal grew into a story, then into something larger, a quiet testimony about how one small act could fracture an empire and heal two broken men. She never published it, never told anyone. Some things, she decided, were meant to stay as whispers, like prayers between the living and the dead. Years later, when people asked how she'd managed to stay kind in a world that wasn't, she'd just smile and say, because someone once reminded me to. And on stormy nights, when thunder rolled over the water and the city lights blurred in the mist, she'd look out from her balcony, waiting, not for fear, but for the echo of an old man's gratitude. Sometimes, when the wind was right, she could almost hear it, the faint scrape of a lighter, the soft chuckle of a ghost who'd outlived his own legend. And she'd whisper back, I'm still trying. Candace never saw Sal or De Niro again, but she learned that mercy leaves fingerprints, faint, indelible marks on the people it touches. And sometimes, even the mafia remembers kindness. Storms fade, but mercy lingers. Candace's story reminds us that even in a world built on power, one act of kindness can echo louder than gunfire. Subscribe now, because your smallest choice might just rewrite someone else's ending.